getting to meet and become friends a little bit with Rob Halford. When we reached out to him to do the introduction to the Henry and Glenn Forever and Ever, and after he not only wrote it immediately, he was super nice and had already read the book, so I didn't even have to send it to him. He was like, "Yes, I've read these. You put me in the third issue," and I was like, "So." Yeah, and then he invited me to Judas Priest show like 3 months later in LA, and I got to go meet him, and he's so nice, and we like kept in touch for years. We kind of lost touch in recent years. I mean, he's just super busy, so I don't ever bug him. But every once in a while he'll be like, "I'm coming through town if you want to come to a show." So he still thinks of me, which is amazing. Like, I grew up worshiping him as a young metalhead and punk, just like Rob was God. He literally is the metal god. So I think he trademarked that name. So, but yeah, he's super nice and wonderful human being and a really genuine guy. If you don't follow him on Instagram, he's the grandpa you wish you had. He's such a genuine, positive person out there. So that's most absurd and nicest thing that's happened as a result of this. So,
Tom, your illustration of you standing behind Rob and
he's giving me a back row.
He's giving you a back row. It's so creepy, and it's so creepy, and like the most awesome way. I love it. Yeah, fantastic. Oh, also,
hi, I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 28 years.
I'm Ellie Blue, the vice president of Microcosm. We started this podcast to share what we've learned with newer publishers, so you can learn from our mistakes. Or maybe you just want to learn about the publishing industry.
Welcome back to A People's Guide to Publishing, where this week we have two very special guests bringing back we said it was complete, we said it was ridiculous, we said it was ridiculously complete, we said it was completely ridiculous, but Henry and Glenn is back again now, and so we have Tom and Justin, who are both writers, artists, creators in this series. So can you tell us the cliff notes? How did this happen?
What is the thing? For anyone who doesn't know about Henry and Glenn, what's your intro spiel?
It's the dumbest, best idea I ever had. It's okay. Crash course. It all began with this little book, or rather, slightly before this, there was a zine version that I self-published with a few friends. And even before that, it was literally just us doodling on bar napkins, on the idea of what if they were roommates? What if they were a couple? Just riffing on jokes for that. And it turned into a zine, which then you published, and it turned into a monster. And then I continued the series. When I did the second series, which led to this, the Henry and Glenn Forever and Ever, I came prepared, and I'm in my studio, so everything's handy. But that was around, I think, 2011 or 12. I wanted to try something a little different, expand on stories, open up the world more, bring in more artists like Justin and Ed Luce and many others that I had met along the way in my comics career, who had encouraged me towards doing more of these comics. And Ed Luce was actually one of the first people to say, if you ever do more, I want to be involved. So that led me to opening up and adding more artists to the universe. And then we kind of finished that when we did that complete edition, which is still available in paperback.
But you're a respectable cartoonist, Justin. You're a respectable queer cartoonist. Why would you get involved in this nonsense?
Yeah,
respectable now. Is that what they're? Is that the shit they're saying behind my back?
Rumors,
Well, maybe it is.
Slander and lies. Yeah, I was incredibly honored when Tom asked me to be part of this. I thought it's such a wonderful idea, and yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think he needed to bring in some actual queer cartoonists onto the project.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's it's interesting, this whole like idea of shipping, and it walks a line between genuine queer culture and also sort of a parody of it, or sort of concerns that really have nothing to do with queer culture. I mean, I look at something like BL, right, from the world of manga, Boy Love or Shonenai, Yaoi, however you want to talk about it, which is usually shipping male characters, or creating sex and romance stories between male characters by women creators for primarily female audience. So I sort of think of Henry and Glenn as a sort of weird permutation of that, where it's like mostly for straight audiences, but mostly created by a lot of straight people as well, but utilizing queer conventions and such and ideas. But the way that, I mean, attention is everything, right? And so Tom is not only lovely and talented, but also like a beautiful human being, and like I know, and also knows a lot about queer culture and gay culture in general. Like witness the fact that he has this parody Tom of Finland cover, which you have to know your shit to be able to pull that off. So I guess the last thing I would just, there's this sort of tension right now in the world between that I wrestle with, and I certainly my students do. So by the way, I'm the chair of the MFA in Comics program at California College of the Arts. So I'm an educator as well. I just had to make that little plug. I'm sorry, but this sort of tension between, on the one hand, we are expected to diversify our storytelling, right, in the modern world. That our stories and characters should reflect the genuine diversity of the world around us, right? And that's it's an onus on us as creators to do so. On the other hand, we're also being told that we should stay in our lanes, right, and that we shouldn't presume to speak for someone else in their experience. So those things kind of butt up against each other a lot. So I think something like Henry and Glenn is a really wonderful way to thread that needle, where it's like it's taking the piss out of everything, and it's bringing in different creators with different perspectives and letting them all play in the sandbox. I curated a show called Batman on Robin a while back, and that was all like homoerotic art of Batman and Robin, but created by all different kinds of people, straight people, gay people, trans, cis, everything. And seeing that sort of diversity of approaches to the material was just really wonderful. And I think that's what Tom's been doing with Henry and Glenn. Like every story in the series, reflects a different sort of perspective on that world and on that sandbox he's created. I'm sorry, that was a long-winded response. I don't know.
No, I appreciate you bringing all that up, because I know that those are things that often come up in the conversation about it, and it's something I've tried to straddle the line too of who is able to go in what direction with the characters, and often like what I tell non-queer creators is think of it as punk rock Bert and Ernie. Just like have fun with that. Keep your jokes more about their music than something you don't know about. If you're not a part of that culture, don't push that line. And there were people along the way that I had to reject because they did something vaguely homophobic, and that's unfortunate. So, but I tried to keep it away from that angle. And then when I was lucky enough to get someone like Justin Haller at Loose, I said, do anything you want. Like you can take, let the reins free, do whatever you want, make it as explicit as you want, just not X-rated. That's, we don't go really there. Justin's like gotten almost as close as we can with that, with putting him in bondage gear in hell in the Forever and Ever series. So
Tom, he asked for it.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was referring Hades, if we're being clear.
Yeah, Hades. Yes, sorry.
In that story, I wanted to go as gay as possible because I wanted to sort of be a counterbalance and just and do that thing exactly what Tom was saying. That what you're saying is that that I could sort of dive into the cultural jokes that would be harder for straight creators to do, right? So I just made it as as possible. Every sort of inside reference I could think of, and that was super fun to do. But I'll also say that like it scratches my punk rock itch, because a lot of I also I was in and out of punk squats in New York in the early '90s, and I have a whole punk rock past, and so like to be able to do something that pokes fun at that as well and sort of dives into that is really exciting for me.
Right. And that's always been the thing. Like in 2010, when the book came out and people had heard about the book, but they hadn't read the book, I got a lot of, wow, that's really homophobic. And then when we brought it to Pride and we had it at Pride, people were like, who are these guys? Like, I don't know who they are. And then when we brought it to people that are into shipping, they were like, oh, they don't even have sex? Like, what's the point? And so we have kind of like found this, like if you were to explain, like there's clearly an audience for this book, but it defies all the typical categorizations of how people think of segmentation or, like how people think of, like it's not a romance novel in any sense. I mean, it's an anti-romance.
There is a happily ever after, though, which is very important.
Well, I don't know if it's happily.
But there's a sweetness to it that's actually really engaging, I think.
But so why bring it back?
I didn't think I would, but honestly, over the years, as the going around and still continuing to go on to conventions with my other books, people kept asking, when we have more Henry and Glenn, and I kept putting it off because I didn't want to keep exploiting the idea if I didn't have a reason to. But then during COVID, I was out in the desert for a little retreat to get away from LA during the COVID lockdown. And I came up with an idea about them adopting a new pet, and while their house is starting to fall apart, and it's roughly based on stuff I'm experiencing in my own life. But just having fun with that, and Henry and Glenn, the real entities, continue to be cartoon characters in their own lives. So, but as I approach a new series, I always want to make it slightly different. So, in some ways, I'm trying to make these characters even more my own, and less. The jokes are there for the punk rock fans, of course, but it's becoming more of my own thing. I think in a weird way, they're becoming my own little characters for like just kind of laughing at the world right now, or whatever's going on. Not specific politics necessarily, but some of that stuff does pop up in the humor. So so that's, I don't know. I just had the idea and I figured I might as well try it. And you guys have always encouraged me to do more. So here we are.
It does seem like it's found by new audiences all the time. I mean, that's the thing that fascinates me, is that most and I mean, the bummer is always going to be that the original book will have been read by so many more people than the newer books, which are there's a supreme universe that you have built. Yes. And you have unfolded this incredible, weird bit of lore of it's jokes on comic books, it's jokes on punk rock, it's jokes on weird, very specific details of each of their lives, and it's and there's no limit to that. And so when the real Henry's house went up for sale in the LA Times and they did an article about it, there's people in the comments that are like, oh, that's so great, he's finally moving in with Glenn.
Yeah, I know, that was actually popping up in real estate. It was, and then Glenn put his house up for sale, the Notorious house, and somebody snuck in and got pictures of everything, and I got sent those, and man, there was it was it's gonna end up in the book. So
Oh, that's
but yeah, there's a lot of this also comes from like the more I've been out there promoting the original series, the more stories people keep telling me, and I'm like, oh, okay. Write a little post-it note in my notebook, like, okay, you gotta remember that as a joke later. So I get a lot of like, funny stories. Like somebody told me about he has a problem with French onion soup having to be exactly perfect. So and they watched him order like French onion soup like 6 times over dinner and just demanding differences, and they couldn't get it right. And so
yeah. How do you parody something like that? I mean, that's like
it just writes itself. Like I can't not do it. So
yeah. I think I really do love how like you've created your own universe there. The world building is really lovely, and to your point, like it's it relates back to the actual characters who they are in real life, but they've taken a sort of on a second life in the pages of the comic, and they become sort of their own characters that are related to the reality, but they don't have to be slavishly so, and they can sort of do their own thing, which is great.
So this is the first new Henry and Glenn Forever content in a decade. And
Yeah, that's true.
it's coming in the form of a floppy comic. Is it called The All New Henry and Glenn Forever?
We've had a few different.
here's the cover right here.
Woo!
All new Henry and Glenn.
Henry and Glenn comics and stories #1.
Yeah, yet again, bringing in another comics reference. I love that you're doing.
Yeah, as Charles Schultz referenced, but the title is kind of a reference to like Karl Barks' Uncle Scrooge and Duck comics.
Yeah,
Nice.
Because whenever they would get a new publisher for Disney Comics, they'd kind of like retitle it. So it's kind of like, here's a new version of Henry and Glenn. Let's give it a slightly different title.
I love it.
here's the art I did for the back cover.
Yes.
Riffing on that classic World War II image of the sailor and the nurse, and I figured we needed a sort of positive ending wars. Let's end wars with a kiss sort of image, and
Yeah,
to do that than Henry and Glenn.
I love it. Beautiful, and the full color version he just sent me, it's even more pretty. It's gonna be a beautiful back cover. So yeah.
Thank you.
Can't wait to see it. I mean, and yeah, so this is coming out in fall of 2024 when, I guess, is there ever a time when we don't need that message of ending war?
Love.
With love. True love. The greatest story ever told.
Yeah, and I think I feel like the #1 reason for people read romance books is like for a distraction from the romance that they are not having. And I feel like this is sort of the same way where you're like, we've always joked that the public lives of Henry and Glenn are fictional and the book is real, like the book is what actually happens, because their personas are so caricature. And to be honest, and when Tom brought this idea to me in the first place, I was like, Henry Rollins and Glenn Danzig, those are like guys from the 80s. Like nobody even knows who those guys are anymore. And I have since fallen into the beautiful, glorious world of the weird, obsessive fan culture of both of them, and how there are innumerable pages where people just like make obscure referential jokes.
Yeah.
And so, Justin, what are your favorite obscure referential jokes to latch on to?
The things that I definitely gravitate towards, again, Tom's constant sort of referencing other comic book. He had a Liefeld cover, parody cover, which was amazing. The Tom of Finland one. So that's the stuff that really sort of floats my boat as a comic geek. But of course, some of the punk rock references, and then queer culture stuff, right? So it's hitting a nice set of internal internal jokes. I was going to say, one thing I was going to say about to sort of comment on what Tom had mentioned before about people who would sort of send in jokes that were homophobic and sort of missing the point of the thing, the sort of the nature and intent of the work, is that I think about jokes where the punchline is they're gay, right? That's not a punchline.
No.
So there's plenty of things to make fun of in queer culture and gay culture. Like there is a mountain of things, and one should. But the joke, the punchline should never be they're gay, right? That's not. Right.
The punchline to me was always hypermasculinity, which
which
can go any direction, either direction. So that was always the punchline for me. Is their hypermasculinity can be amplified in whatever way you want to, and that's where the humor lies.
Absolutely.
It can take you to toxic levels, or it can take you to comedic levels. Whatever.
And I think that was the part that fell apart for people that didn't know who they were or didn't read the book.
Yeah.
They thought it was like a kind of a punching down low level humor. And then when you're like, okay, you should see the public personas of either one of these people and you would have zero questions.
Right. Yeah.
But I also do think that, good storytelling, like I actually did a reading of my story from Henry and Glenn recently for my students, and none of them knew who these people, Henry and Glenn as real people were, which was a little bit terrifying for me realizing how old I am. But they loved the story. I mean, not to blow smoke up my own ass, but I think that's true of all the stories that Tom has collected in the series, is that they're good stories and they're really fun in and of themselves, even if you don't know who Henry and Glenn are. And that's a really difficult tightrope to walk narratively, but I think that's been achieved.
Yeah, in a sense, it's kind of like a punk rock Archie series, just like a bunch of like vignette, ridiculous stories of scenarios, and that's why I tell my only editorial comment for artists is punk rock Bert and Ernie, just straddle that line. So.
Is Punk Rock Bert and Ernie the next series? Is that gonna?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, maybe they'll make an appearance now.
Do you know of anyone who's like become fans of the real Henry and Glenn through the comic?
Maybe. I'm not sure. That would be interesting.
Does it go that way at all?
Right.
Amazing.
I mean, well, maybe my mom. No, she's never really actually listened to their music, but I did, like, when you mentioned Easter eggs, I did for a Mother's Day like years ago. I made an annotated version of the books for her, trying to explain all the jokes to her, like, and it was a lot. I was trying to go through it, figure out. I can't resist like hiding little nuggets here and there. So it's just, and again, like people just like whisper in my ear, oh, he said this once, and I'm like, okay, that's going in there. So
a limited edition annotated Henry and Glenn.
Right.
Do you think this is something more people would want than your mom?
That could be fantastic.
Just say.
Okay.
There's a lot, and this is so like my answer to Ellie's question is that usually our podcast is us arguing with each other. So I feel like if you didn't have an emotional attachment decades old to these people, it would be impossible at this point to like become a fan of them. Like you would have to have had a longing, positive experience as a teenager or in your 20s, maybe. Because it was like by the time Mother came out, it was over for me. Like by the time like the Rollins band was a band, I was moved on. But so
oddly, his career has been revived in the wake of Henry and Glenn forever too. So he's had like 3 or 4 more albums. He's touring. He just played a big festival near LA like last week with the Misfits. All that's happened after I started making fun of him. So
you're welcome, Glenn.
I've helped him.
Well, I also just say as like a young queer punk rocker, like it was a gay punk rocker, I was just sort of like, oh, I get to like look at like hot guys, and so you sort of imprint that way, and it would be hard to sort of recreate that magic now. There's a formative like you have a little kind of crush on a celebrity crush on someone.
Right. And there's an account on TikTok where like somebody just posts a daily video of like Henry being Henry, and that's like almost okay, but like it's usually him being kind of crotchety and inadvisable. Like it's not what you want to and it's, so it's like hard because it's like I feel like the book works because it's like making fun of nostalgia for your heroes,
right? Yeah, I've always And well, yeah, that kind of brings me to another component of the new series. Is I'm doing this true tales of Henry and Glenn Forever, which are things that have happened along the way and people I've met. And one of them, I actually ended up on the first story is I actually ended up on a plane with the drummer for Sam Hain, one of the drummers for Sam Hain, London May. And when he found out who I was, he was not happy about it at all. But we were on a plane for 5 hours.
Yes.
And actually, back to what Justin said, the story starts with me and Ed Luce at Maryland Death Fest, which is a death metal festival. Ed and I traveled together in 2012, and we had the best time. And he was just he loves metal dudes, so he was it was a lot of eye candy for him while we were banging our heads. We had a great time that weekend, and then I ended up on a plane with London May, and he gave me a lecture. But we had a good conversation, and one of the things he brought up was he was like, "Well, you're like the worst kind of fan. You want to tear down your idols." It's like, well, isn't that one of the first parts of tenets of punk rock? Kill your idols. It's just nothing sacred.
Yeah.
So have fun.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
Yeah. So anyway, that's another roundabout story. But that story of me, I did a 4-page comic strip of me and London May on the plane having a conversation that
I'm excited.
It's great. It's actually, I mean, is it? Do you try to make it comedic, or do you actually?
I mean, I try to a little bit just visually, but but also because it's 4 pages of people sitting on a plane.
Yeah,
but it's close to our actual conversation
that's
as
great.
possible.
And I think it really gets at there's some profundity that, I mean, there's some really interesting ideas there. So I'm really glad you did that. That's great.
Yeah, and it answers some of the questions, because one of the first things he says is it's not cool to make fun of people for being gay, and I was like, well, that's not the point of the book at all.
Yeah.
So I do get to answer some of the questions we've been talking about here through that conversation that I've put into this strip. So yeah,
right, that's great. And so and I too, as I imagine both of you have been endlessly subjected to people pulling me into a corner of a room and telling me you don't understand, this is what's going on in the lives of these real people. And it's usually pretty entertaining. And I have to say, in the world of rumor or what have you, kind of conjecture, there's complete consistency along the thread of all these stories. Nobody has ever been in contradiction with another person. So that, it kind of makes me second guess my own views on gossip.
Well, I mean, would that we lived in a world in which gossip was always, it was done in this lovely it was presented in this lovely package of humor comics, right? Really well done humor comics. But yeah, I mean, I think what Tom said about kill your idols, sort of, and roasting the people around you that have created the culture that we swim in is exactly what we're supposed to do on some level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In some ways, I think some people said it was sort of like a punk rock mad magazine at some point to me. And it was it's kind of going in that direction too. But yeah, it's just it goes all over the place. But I grew up, my influences were many of the same as I think Justin and Ed and others. John Waters and Kids in the Hall, and I grew up child of that kind of humor, and pushing the limits, and not falling in line with the mainline culture, but trying to make fun of it all. But with respect, I'm not trying to punch down on anybody except the 2 people.
Well, also,
but that's the stories I write are mostly based on stuff in my own life where I get the narratives from. I did adopt a new dog, 2 new dogs during COVID, and so that was a lot of the inspiration for this story. Is what if Henry and Glenn adopted a new pet? How would they deal with it? And the pet turns out to love Henry and turn into a monster around Glenn. So that's where a lot of the humor comes from. But that's all from my life, and then you just sprinkle in jokes from their real lives, and voila, it's done.
a lot of the humor references that you're talking about, the sort of underground and indie comedy of like John Waters or whatever. I mean, a lot of that comes out of gay culture, right? Sort of camp humor, and it makes sense to then use that as use that tool here for a project like this. Yeah.
Like a sprinkling in that. Yeah. Right. And so the thing that always amazes me, and, like I said, like people are still discovering the book. I mean, 15 or 20 years later, depending how you look at it.
And it's delightful to observe.
And so it'll be constant where somebody will like tell a Glenn story. It's usually a Glenn story. Sorry, Glenn. And then somebody will be like in Henry and Glenn Forever when this happens. And then you watch other people are like, wait, what are you talking about? And then they pull it in and they're like, holy shit, I just ordered 2 of them because my other friend needs it too. And like, that is magical to me. And so I feel like new books obviously are going to like further propel that, where people are like, okay, wait, this is brilliant.
I was just at a convention in Charlotte, North Carolina last weekend, Heroes Convention, which has become one of my favorites because my parents live there and I can visit them. But it's also a really fun show where they actually they support artists and art. Like it's a different culture than like the ones where they worship Spider-Man. They're actually there to meet artists. But anyway, side point, I had to what you were saying, a dad who came up with his son who was don't presume son, but because they looked like they were anyway, had crow makeup on, very skinny, sort of a woman's shirt on a non-binary body. Sorry, I'm trying to be careful. I'm old,
Yeah.
so I'm almost 50, so I'm trying to be careful and respectful. Anyway, his dad was showing him my book and trying to explain who the actual characters were. His child responded to the other aspect of it, and they bought a book, and he bought it for his how do you say his child, and they walked off talking together about it, and that was in the South.
Incredible.
That breaks my heart and warms my heart all at the same time. So that's his dad was just an old punk, and their kid. I mean, sorry. I apologize. Anyway, it was a wonderful moment, and I love seeing that. That makes it all worth it to me. So
Yeah.
I never thought this was a book that would have an appeal crossing generations. But
oh, definitely.
Here we are.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's because there's different appeals to different ages. Yeah.
That's the story.
Do you have a favorite Henry and Glenn story in real life, Justin?
No, the comic stories are definitely more interesting to me. The real ones.
Yeah, well, you got to read the your story to your students, and that's interesting to have a different perspective of that.
Yeah. And I, to be honest, I don't follow Henry Rollins or Glenn Danzig that closely, so I don't know a lot of the stories of sort of their. I mean, they were important figures for me when I was younger because they were hot. I was a young gay kid, right? But I don't really follow them that closely. I'm much more interested in the comic versions of them that you create and other people create in the series than in who they are in reality.
Right.
But,
and it's interesting because with the last time I was, this will Minneapolis Indie Expo, so this is probably more than 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody came up and they were like, I saw that you were here and I needed to get a Henry and Glenn t-shirt, and that was why they came to the event, was to buy that shirt. And that was the kind of thing where I'm like, this is, and it was a queer person who was got into the book because of that merging of values.
Mm-hmm.
And that was and I think it was before we did the collected trade paperback, so it was somewhere between 2010 and 2012, 2014, and so that was the first time I had really had that encounter where I was like, okay, this is bridging this gap for other people. I didn't expect that.
Mhm.
So that was really cool to see people like, and like the person knew about the book. It was already, I've definitely watched hundreds of people discover the book for the first time in real time in front of me, and that has its own value. But that's like repeated so many times over that I'm like, okay, like this is a thing that happens. But like watching people be like, I came to this event because I needed the T-shirt that like makes my life make sense to my
So, I mean, as publishers, like like this book must be quite different from in certain ways from the rest of your catalog, and so reactions to it are very different at conventions. Like how does that play out?
What do you think?
Well, I mean, this is one of the things I wanted to talk about actually, because we publish some comics like this. Well, we don't publish any comics like this.
There are no comics like
but we
this.
do publish some other comics.
Yeah.
And then and that's a small part of our publishing, honestly. Most of what we publish is like gift books or books that you read that are just text. And yeah, so selling comics, especially comics that they have a super strong niche, but it doesn't fit into any specific market, except maybe going to a punk show that's queer friendly. It's been, like we've had to be very focused on more just kind of like our passive marketing, honestly, and letting people find it and come to us.
Yeah.
And the thing there is like this book and this series, it fits in better with we do nonfiction textual books about like the history of punk. We don't do like nostalgia, but we do like scene histories, and we do books about that are like unpacking a lot of the depth of a scene. And this fits better with those books than it does in comic book stores.
Yeah, it's an awkward fit with comic book stores and comics readers, to be honest.
Because
it never really did take off in comic stores. It was always through the other channels that Microcosm was able to find for it that it took off. So
like I feel like the quintessential place that I've seen people find this book are at like the sort of retro chic clothing store, and they have a counter display.
Yes. Oh yeah, that makes sense.
That's the market for it.
And the roller derby people were into it. Like they were into it more than like people were like, because at Pride you have to like know enough things.
Yeah.
It's like at roller derby people would come up and be like, I've met Glenn Danzig. Let me tell you a terrible story.
Okay.
Be like,
make fun of him. Yeah. Also, I think there's like, you should sell at the Stud, here in San Francisco, like this sort of I think a lot of maybe mainstream queer culture is not going to get it in the same way that mainstream punk culture or whatever is, comics culture. It is, as you said, a sort of odd niche but it sort of hits a certain note that's really wonderful for those that can hear it, hear that note.
Just to like get a little bit boring for a minute. Sorry, can we talk about something boring?
I guess.
I try to always bring
boring stuff
podcast episode. But can we talk about like what are the actual plans for this new series? Like, there's going to be several comics.
There's more than one book. Yeah.
So this would be. So far, we've got the first issue ready to go of what I've planned as we'll have at least a 4-part story arc that I've written about them dealing with the new pet and their house and other things that get in the way. But I've got about a 4-issue story arc written of that. So, but I'm, we'll see what happens after that. If there's more ideas to go, we keep going. But as I go along, I intend to invite other artists to join me to add to it. Like Justin is doing a back cover. This first issue ended up being mostly me because I wanted to include the true tale about meeting Sam Hain's drummer, and I intend to write more of those stories as well to fit here and there. So and then who knows, we'll just keep it going from there, see what happens. But yeah, I intend to continue to expand the universe with new creators and old creators coming back. I just talked to Benjamin Mara about possibly doing a back cover. He's been doing these beautiful fantasy paintings lately, and
nice.
See maybe them fighting a dragon would be fun. yeah, trying to reached out to other artists and trying to find new ones as I get back out into the convention circuit and stuff. And yeah, so yeah, we'll see where it
Awesome.
goes.
Yeah.
But at least 4 issues coming.
So we're funding the first one on Kickstarter right now, or it will be right now by the time this comes out. When does the second one? When is the second one planned for?
Second issue, I don't know. Probably.
Okay.
I mean, I've got it mostly written. I haven't started drawing it yet, so we'll have to do some promotion when this book comes out. But I'll probably start drawing it this fall and maybe get issue. It'd be nice to get at least 1 issue out a year. But if it speeds up, maybe 2 a year, 3 a year. We'll see.
Awesome.
Comics are super easy and really fast to make. So
Yeah.
I've heard.
I know, right? It's always it's always the question is like somebody buys the issue and then starts waiting, and I'm
Right.
guessing like when you're a kid, you like see the comics come out monthly, or like when it's the X-Men, there's literally like it's staggered, so it's weekly.
Yeah.
And then it's
I'm trying to approach this a little bit more like a 90s indie book. Like you get like
Yeah.
1 issue every 6 months, but
Yeah.
but I'm trying to make, each issue is self-contained, even though it's part of a bigger story. Each one can be read on its own and be satisfying. It's not ends on a giant cliffhanger. And yeah, and as I hope to, as the first issue comes out, it will not only attract a new audience, but also like new creators that would be interested in contributing to it. Because I've been, as a lot of us have been, I've been since COVID been kind of like cut off from a lot of the comic scene, and don't know everybody that's new and exciting out there. So I'm looking forward to meeting new artists and finding out who would be interested in joining us in this ridiculous idea.
If someone's listening to this and they're like, I am a comics artist and I have a brilliant story for this, like, how would they contact you?
I guess we'll set up an email of some sort for that to to receive letters and idea, Yeah.
Cool. Well, we'll
See.
put that on the Kickstarter page.
Or, if they see me at a convention, come say hi, introduce yourself.
Oh, and I guess we kind of buried the other lead, which is that this will be the first ever full color Henry and Glenn.
Oh yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah, that'll be
because
fun.
due to the absurdity of the pandemic, printers literally it went from wildly impossibly expensive to we would much rather do this in full color than not. And we've really, so that'll be really cool for people.
Oh, by the way, just as a little aside, he's the metalhead, and I'm also obsessed with Wonder Woman, because Wonder Woman is like this fantastically interesting character. So at our wedding, we actually the song we walked out to. We had a friend's band do a death metal cover of the Wonder Woman theme song from the 70s.
Whoa.
With that bass line.
Yeah. I can hear that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's fantastic.
Nice.
Anyway, I would just in terms of my own. I just love reading that story that I did for the earlier series. Doing that at comics readings, it's just really fun for me. So that's been the sort of best takeaway. Just seeing the reactions to these readings, because everybody just starts hooting and hollering by the end of it, which is really great.
Yeah.
And Freddie Mercury as the Queen of Gaiety, like, okay, yeah, that's fine. Check.
Well, thank you for bringing new life to the Henry and Glenn universe and letting us have some part in putting it out into the world.
Thank you both for publishing this weird book. Like, I don't think publishers would have been scared of it, and I'm really like, it's really impressive. Like, thank you for this.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for taking a chance on it, because we didn't know the world. We honestly didn't even know the world wanted it or needed it, but
I thought we would get sued. And then I hoped we would. And then I was disappointed when we didn't.
Well, it's not too late.
Yeah, right.
All right, well.
Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub,
On Twitter at Microcosm.
on Facebook at Microcosm Publishing.
On Instagram at Microcosm_pub.
and here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Oh, what are we looking at? Colin is holding up
Pretty.
Painting I did.
Oh, it's so good.
I'm jumping into a vat of skulls like Uncle Scrooge.
so good. I love that print.
All right. Thank you.